My name is Yank, and if you keep your money at one of the three biggest banks in America, that number is 1/100th of 1%. Which means my friend Nadia, who has loyally kept $31,000 parked at the same bank since she was 22, earns $3 a year. $3. Her brother-in-law Marcus has almost identical money, the same federal insurance, the same zero risk. He earns about $1,350. That is 450 times more. And Marcus is not smarter than Nadia. He filled out a form while half watching a cooking show. 15 minutes. And if your money is parked where I suspect it is, you are on the losing side of that number today. Every finance channel on the internet is calling this the great high-yield savings comeback of 2026. It is not a comeback. It is something far stranger. And Marcus is about to show you why, right after he nearly loses all of it. Quick warning before we start. Every rate mentioned today shifts, sometimes weekly, so verify the live numbers before acting on anything here. There is a checklist waiting for you at the end. Let's begin with your gap, because you almost certainly have one, and it is bigger than you would guess. The best high-yield savings accounts in America right now pay up to 4.5%. That is what is actually available to you. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation surveys more than 500 institutions and publishes what Americans actually earn instead, and that number is 0.38 of 1%. It has not budged since April. So the typical saver is earning roughly 1/12 of what is on the table, and that is the generous version, since online banks are dragging that average upward. If your cash sits at a large brick-and-mortar bank, you are collecting 1 penny per $100 per year. Leave $100 there for 12 months and you earn a single penny. A gumball machine would reject it. Here is why that is worse than merely boring. Inflation in June ran at 3.5%, with core inflation at 2.6%. Your money is not simply sitting still, it is shrinking. Every year it stays put, it buys less. Nadia's $31,000 loses roughly $1,000 of purchasing power annually, while her bank hands her $3 for the trouble. Marcus, meanwhile, beats inflation by about a point. Same country, same week, same risk. That is the entire story, and almost every video on this topic gets it backwards. Because here is the truth behind the comeback narrative: rates did not come back. They fell. In the summer of 2023, top accounts were paying over 5%. Then the Federal Reserve cut rates 6 separate times between September 2024 and the end of 2025. The federal funds target dropped from 5.25 down to 3.5, and banks passed that along to savers immediately, enthusiastically, and in full. By immediately, enthusiastically, and in full, I mean they slashed your rate faster than they ever raised it. 4.5% today is not a recovery. It is the tail end of a long, quiet decline. So why is everyone suddenly shouting about savings accounts? 3 reasons, and only one should matter to you. First, the cutting stopped. The Fed has held steady all year, and at the June meeting, 9 of 19 officials projected the next move would be a hike, not a cut. Second, inflation climbed back up, so people started checking whether their money was keeping pace. Yours probably is not. And third, the reason that actually matters, and for the first time in about 15 years, a boring savings account beats inflation without you doing anything clever. Not in 2009. Not in 2021, when the national average sat at 0.4% and your savings were quietly evaporating. Right now, boring works. So the comeback is not that rates got good. It is that they stopped getting worse, and people finally looked up. Which leaves you with a much better question. Where has your money been sitting for the last 3 years, and who has been pocketing the difference? The answer has an unglamorous name: deposit beta. Deposit beta measures how much of a Fed rate change actually gets passed on to you. If the Fed hikes a full point and your bank raises you half a point, that is a beta of 50%, simple enough. Here is the part that is not simple. Researchers who have studied U.S. banking data across multiple rate cycles found that deposit beta is asymmetric, and the asymmetry runs exactly the direction you would expect. When the Fed cuts, your bank cuts you fast and cuts you completely. When the Fed hikes, whatever reaches you is slow, partial, and often indistinguishable from nothing at all. You absorb the losses. You wait on the gains. One way to put it politely is that deposit pricing is downward flexible and upward sticky, which is an expensive way of saying the elevator only goes down, and someone set the stairs on fire. Now watch what that did to someone real. From 2022 into 2023, the Fed ran the fastest hiking cycle since the 1980s, moving from 0 all the way to 5.25% in about 16 months. Over that exact stretch, Nadia's bank moved her savings rate from 0.01% to, brace yourself, 0.01%. Congratulations, Nadia. 16 months of the most aggressive monetary tightening in 40 years, and her reward was nothing. The bank did not fail to pass it along. It declined to. And it worked, because almost nobody left. Which is where this stops being your personal problem and becomes a national accounting problem. Americans hold roughly $10.2 trillion in savings and checkable deposits. Trillion, with a T. Your money is somewhere in that pile, and a serious chunk of it sits earning under 0.5%, while 4.5% is available to anyone with a phone and 10 minutes. Marcus was part of that pile too, right up until last spring. Over the 2 years he spent waiting, he gave up about $4,000 in interest by doing absolutely nothing, which remains the easiest way ever devised to lose $4,000. The platform Raisin estimated that if every household switched to a competitive rate, Americans would collectively earn about $396 billion more per year. I will be upfront, Raisin sells access to these accounts, so treat that figure as directional rather than gospel. But cut it in half, and you are still looking at roughly $200 billion a year that legally belongs to someone, carries no risk, and that nobody collects. Now let me correct a figure you have almost certainly seen before. You have probably been told the average American household keeps $62,410 in the bank, usually by someone trying to make you feel behind. That figure is nearly useless. Ignore it. The median household, the one actually in the middle, the one you are far more likely to resemble, has $8,000. The mean is nearly 8 times the median because a handful of very wealthy households drag the average into orbit. Whenever you see an average balance quoted without a median beside it, someone is either being careless or selling you something. And that survey data is from 2022, so it is 4 years stale already. You are probably not sitting on 60 grand. You are closer to 8. And here is exactly what you are thinking right now. You are thinking, well Yank, on $8,000 the difference is about $330 a year, and that is not going to change my life, so why bother? That is a fair objection, and it is the right one. Let me answer it properly. $330 is your car insurance deductible. It is a flight home. It is the emergency cushion that stops one bad week from turning into a credit card balance you carry for 2 years. And you get it for 15 minutes of typing. That works out to over $1,300 an hour. You will not be paid that rate for anything else you do all year. And then it scales with you. The day your balance reaches $20,000, that same 15 minutes is worth $800 a year. At $50,000, it is over $2,000. You are not doing this for the balance you have today. You are doing it once, for every balance you will ever carry. So your money is real, and the gap is real, which brings us to the actual question this video is asking: why have not you moved it yet? The research here is almost comical. The average American has banked with the same institution for about 17 years, longer than most cars, most jobs, and an uncomfortably large share of marriages. 36% have never even considered switching. Surveys on rate awareness are all over the place. One 2026 study found that only 7% of Americans are earning 4% or better, another found 22%, but they agree on the shape of the problem. Somewhere between a quarter and 40% of people could not tell you their own savings rate if asked. I want to be very clear here, this is not you being lazy. Your direct deposit is already routed there. Your autopay is linked to it. Your bill history lives there. Nadia's debit card has been in her wallet so long the numbers have worn smooth, and that card is doing more to keep her money in place than any interest rate ever could. Switching feels like an entire Saturday of paperwork, so it becomes next Saturday, then the Saturday after that. Nobody is going to interrupt that pattern. No bank is going to mail you a letter that says, "We are paying you 1 penny per $100, and there is an institution down the street paying 450 times that." That letter does not exist. Writing it is nobody's job. You were never failing at this. There was simply never a built-in moment in your life where anyone was going to tell you. The entire relationship is designed around the assumption that you will not check, and statistically, the banks are right. By the way, this is exactly the kind of thing we walk through step by step inside our community, where we work from real numbers instead of vibes, and you will find the link in the description. Now, Marcus, because I promised you Marcus. He did everything I am telling you to do, and it nearly cost him everything. When Marcus moved his money, he did what you would do, he searched for the biggest number. And the biggest number is almost never the right one. Some advertised rates are promotional and quietly reset after 3 or 6 months, long after you have stopped paying attention. Some are tiered, where the headline rate only applies to your first slice of deposits and everything above that earns pocket lint. There is a credit union out there advertising 10% right now, which sounds spectacular until you read the fine print and discover it only applies to your first $1,000. That is $100 a year, one nice dinner, for correctly spotting a marketing gimmick. But Marcus's real mistake was subtler, and it is the part one most need you to take away from this. Several of the best rates he found were not offered by banks at all. They were offered by apps, with clean interfaces, friendly design, and a small line of text reading FDIC insured. Here is what that line actually means for you. Federal deposit insurance covers $250,000 per depositor, per insured bank, per ownership category. Apps are not banks. They partner with banks and pool your money into shared accounts, where the insurance protection is supposed to pass through to you, and that pass-through depends entirely on somebody, somewhere, keeping an accurate record that the money is actually yours. In 2024, a middleware company called Synapse, which sat between dozens of these apps and their partner banks, went bankrupt. Over 100,000 people were locked out of their own money. The ledgers had never been properly reconciled. At one app alone, roughly 13,700 customers who had deposited about $65 million were offered a combined total of under $12 million. There are documented cases of people who deposited tens of thousands of dollars and were told the bank had only a few dollars on record in their name. The money had technically been sitting in FDIC-insured banks the entire time. Here is the distinction that should genuinely worry you: insurance protects you when a bank fails. It does nothing at all when the company standing between you and the bank simply loses track of you. Marcus had moved $30,000 into one of these apps for an extra 15 basis points. On $30,000, 15 basis points is $45 a year. He got out before anything happened, but that was the trade he nearly made, a real chance of losing everything for $45. So when you compare accounts, your first question should not be what is the rate, it should be whose name is on the charter. Ask that before you ask anything else. Marcus learned that lesson. Then he learned the second thing nobody tells you about: taxes. Your savings interest is taxed as ordinary income, both federal and state. Interest earned on U.S. Treasury bills is fully taxable at the federal level but exempt from state and local income tax. So the comparison you see on a rate tracking website, 4.5% on a savings account versus 4.15% on a one-year Treasury bill, is not actually the comparison that matters to you. If your state taxes income, the bigger number can end up losing. Run the numbers for a top bracket earner in California: 4.5% in a savings account nets about 2.2% after tax. That same rate from a treasury bill nets about 2.8%, because the state never touches it. That is roughly 27% more after-tax income for a nearly identical asset. Live in a state with no income tax, and that advantage disappears, and the savings account wins on convenience instead. So your correct answer depends on your zip code, which is an extremely annoying thing to be true, but there it is. Nadia, for what it is worth, lives in Ohio and carries a modest balance, so she should stop reading about treasury bills and simply open the savings account. Half of getting this right is knowing which half you can skip. And the same gap shows up everywhere else too. The national average one-year CD pays 1.65%, while the best ones pay 4.35%. This is not a savings account problem. It is a shopping problem. Now, before you go build a bunker out of treasury bills, let me argue against myself for a moment, because a video about savings accounts that skips this part is just an advertisement. Cash is a terrible place to build long-term wealth. Over the last century, there has not been a single 20-year stretch where U.S. stocks lost money. Not one. Over 20 years, $10,000 invested in stocks historically grew to something like $67,000. In cash, about $18,000. That gap is the difference between retiring comfortably and having a long, awkward conversation with your kids about their spare room. But 2026 is unusual, and here is why. Vanguard's 10-year forecast for U.S. stocks, published in January, sits at 3.9 to 5.9% annualized. Cash is currently paying around 4%. When a full decade of expected stock returns barely clears what a savings account pays today, holding more cash is more defensible than it has been in 15 years. That is a model, not a prophecy, and models have been wrong about stocks for most of my adult life. But it is a real argument, and it means that simply invest everything is lazier advice this year than usual. So here is where your cash actually belongs: your emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of expenses, money you will need within 1 to 3 years, sinking funds for the things you already know are coming, the new tires, the deductible, the wedding you are attending whether you like it or not. And I want to sit on that emergency fund point for a second, because only about 46% of American adults can currently cover 3 months of expenses. That is not just a statistic. It is the difference between a blown transmission being a bad weekend and a blown transmission being the thing that starts a debt spiral. It is whether you can say no to a job that is destroying you. 4.5% will not make you rich. It makes your cushion grow while you sleep, instead of shrinking while you sleep. Nadia's cushion has been shrinking for 19 years, and she has never once been told that everything beyond 3 years belongs somewhere with upside. Park your retirement money in a savings account because the rate felt safe, and you will have successfully protected yourself from the wrong danger. Which brings us back to Nadia, and to the only math I actually need you to remember. Nadia has $31,000. A year from now, at her current rate, she will have $31,003. In a competitive account, she would have about $32,400, $1,300 for filling out a form. Now stretch it out further. $30,000 left at the national average for 10 years becomes roughly $31,000. That same $30,000 at 4.5%, if rates held, becomes roughly $46,500. $15,000 of difference, same starting money, same risk, conjured out of nothing more than one Tuesday evening and a little bit of irritation. So here is your checklist. It is really Marcus's checklist, since he paid for it the expensive way so you would not have to, and it is short enough to run through tonight. Confirm your rate is permanent, not promotional. Confirm it applies to your entire balance, not just the first slice. Confirm you are depositing with an actual chartered bank or credit union, not an app sitting on top of one. Stay under $250,000 per bank, per ownership category. And if you live in a high-tax state with a real balance, run the Treasury bill comparison first. That is it. That is your entire move. I am not a financial advisor, and none of this is financial advice, it is arithmetic, and you should absolutely double-check my arithmetic if you want to dig deeper. Our community is free to join, and the link is below. But here is what I keep coming back to. The high-yield savings comeback of 2026 is not really about interest rates at all. Rates went down. The banks did not get generous. The Fed did not get kind. Nothing was handed back to you. The only thing that changed is that enough people finally looked. Nadia's money did not underperform because she made a bad decision. It underperformed because she never made a decision at all. And the entire system was built patiently, and profitably, on the assumption that you would not either. Marcus did not beat her because he was smarter, braver, or better with money. He nearly torched the whole thing chasing an extra $45. He beat her because, one evening, he actually looked. So go look. Not at the market, not at your portfolio, not at anything complicated. Open your banking app, find the interest rate on your savings account, and say the number out loud. If it embarrasses you, congratulations, you have just found the highest paying 15 minutes available to you this year. And unlike almost everything else in personal finance, this one does not require you to be right about the future.